Hello everyone, welcome to Painting Crafty. If you're new here, my name's Melanie and I'm glad you're joining me today. And my returning art and craft friends, I'm glad you decided to take another art break with me today. I so appreciate you doing so. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create this fun fall little landscape. I'm going to show you some simple steps, ideas for how to draw it, and then I'll be showing you how to create this beautiful watercolor look afterwards of that watercolor blend look in the background with just some simple little trees over the top. For those of you who might be interested in having a reference to be able to draw by or a tracer, you can go over to my Ko-fi page. That's where I host my subscription, sketchbook subscription over there. It's very reasonably priced, easy to join, and I so appreciate the people who come over, and it really does support my effort on my channel. So I appreciate all of those who join. Plus I include a reference of the one I painted so you can have something to look at while you create yours. Well, let's go ahead and start with the drawing part, and then we'll move into the watercolor. Let's talk a little bit about the composition of this little landscape. When you're doing a landscape, I always recommend dividing your paper into thirds, and that will decide where your skyline or your horizon line is. So on this one, I divided it into the thirds. I'm just going to eyeball this real quick. And this is the line that I chose. I need to draw that up there. This is the line that I chose to draw my little house on, was this line right here. Now, when I'm drawing this picture, I want to make sure I'm not having it too far in the center. I want to have a little bit off center. So to draw my house, and I don't get too tangled up in all of the perspective. Let's see if we can't see that a little bit. And too much of the perspective. It's just a general kind of look. So to do my house, I start with a rectangle, or you could do it a square, but I'm going to start with a rectangle, right like that for my side. And then to do the side of my house, I'm going to bring my line back. So this is going to help it look like it's going backwards a little bit towards that direction. And then when I come to make this line, I want it to go straight up and down so it matches this one. And now I have my general perspective done. So to make the roof line, I'm going to come across like this, and it just happened to be on this particular one, my third line up. I'm going to be making my line come at an angle just a little ways outside of this part of my house. That'll help it design kind of a little bit more of a roof. And then I'm going to be coming back down this direction, a little bit past this line as well. I'm going to be doing some pen work on this, and if you follow my channel, you know I like to do a sketchy look, so a lot of these lines aren't really going to make much difference. Now I can tell if I'm going to keep my roof line there, I need to move my building out just a little bit more because my roof line would be too far. So let's go ahead and continue my roof line out a little ways, and then let's bring this part out so it matches. Okay, so now it matches up better. I wanted to be able to create just a little area here that looks like my roof is being carried over. You can see how I have that double line there. It looks like my roof is showing just a tiny bit over there. And then for my windows, I just simply did some rectangles. Now you can make your windows as fancy as you like and whatever kind of configuration you would like. I chose to do little T's inside of there with the crossbars being a little higher. And the top of my windows, and I have no idea what this is called, but I put those little details on the very top of my windows, and then I made little flower boxes on the bottom. Just going at an angle, something like that. And then to do my door, I chose to do a rounded door, but you could do a square door. I'm just making a rounded one at the top, putting a handle here, and then some hinges. And that's all my door was just a simple little rounded one. Now you can get as fancy as you'd like in this part of your building. On my sketch that I did for this one, I ended up doing a line across that matched this one, and a line down, and then a V to add just a little bit more detail on that spot. Now let's go ahead and put in our fence. That's really going to be in the foreground, closer to us. So I'm going to be making a little rounded gate and then some wooden little pickets. So when you're doing your gate, you're going to do this little rounded part, just like a little hump, and across. And it looks kind of cute is if you can do your little posts first. And I'm just going to do these quickly. You can take your time. But then when you put your crossbars on, do them individually. So don't like run them all the way across. That will just look too exact. If you do them individually, your hand is going to give it a little bit more character and make your drawing a lot more interesting. So I always suggest doing that. Now I'm going to put a little bit of a door handle here, and I'll end up putting some hinges on here. The one that I drew on this one, I added some hearts onto there. So I added a heart on my door, just those little tiny details. So you can decide whatever details you would like on your house. All right, we have that idea done. Let's pop in a tree and I'll show you an idea for a tree. Now this little tree is the biggest tree, but you're only going to be seeing half of that tree. So I'm going to be starting down here on the ground with the roots of the tree and then building it up. So this is going to be the widest part of my tree, and then it's going to scoop in. This part here, as long as you have the shape that kind of curves in a little ways where it's curved, that will look like it's kind of that crotch of the tree. So adding those little areas, and then it just feathers off into little tiny sticks, and same with over here. Now I'm going to be putting some pen detail in the end. So again, it doesn't matter if your sketches are exact, if you'd like to do pen work. All right, let's go ahead and pop in a tree. I like to just kind of start off to my edge here, bring it down. I'm going to get wider here as I come down because this is my roots, and then bring it back in and up. And then as I come up, I can go off to my side because I know I want it to be taller than my house. I can come up, and this is where I'm going to make that crotch line of my branches. And then as I go closer to the tips, I'm getting smaller and smaller and smaller and bringing it out. I'm going to come up. This one I made one come up. Now mostly trees and branches are going to have more sharp angles. When we make lines curvy, maybe I can show you on this one. When we make our lines curvy, it's going to feel a little bit more like a vine work. So when we do trees and branches, we try to do a little bit more angled look to them, if we can. Although some of the ones in my very back have a little bit more curviness to them, and they still look fine. And these ones down here are going to be bushes. So those can be a different branch as well. But for my tree, I'm going to try to keep it that way. So when I want to make another one off here, I'm going to come backwards, do that little loop that I was talking about, and then come down. So now all of a sudden I made this little area. And then when I come up, I'm going to curve off, follow this, come to the end of the stick, and there I have a little branch. So depending on what you're doing here, you're going to do the same thing. And it can just end off to the side. And there you got a big tree. Now these little ones behind the house, I did 3 of those. Now those are a little bit more wispy. When you do those types of trees, you can come up. This might just be a single brush stroke, and you're going to come up and you're going to still do the same type of look that you're doing here. But they're a series of like Y's off of your branch. So your line's going to come up, and then you've got a Y, and perhaps you've got another Y over here, and that one comes up. That's how you're going to build those small little wispy trees in the back. And that's basically how I created this one as well. Now for your shrubs or your bushes, you don't have to get necessarily a lot of detail in there to make them look nice. And we're going to be adding more watercolor. That's where the really pretty area comes in. But for your branches inside of there, you might want to swoop it up like that. And then perhaps do just a simple line. And this could be very whimsical looking. It doesn't even have to be realistic. So you could create something like that. And then we do washes of watercolor underneath there or around there and create the structure that way. Now to do these little side ones that are by the house, they're going to be shorter and they're going to be similar to this. And then we're going to be adding a sense of volume to this tree by creating it with watercolor, or not necessarily a tree, but a bush. We're going to be creating a sense of volume by creating those watercolor blends or softness in the background. Now my pine trees, I'm not going to draw them. I'm just going to paint those. And those are a lot easier than what you think. They're super fun to paint actually. Well, now that we have a basic idea of what you're going to draw, let's go ahead and start with the watercolor. Since this is very much a fall type of palette of doing this little house, I'm going to be using colors that are very warm in these colors. So a dirty down green, my greens are going to be nice warm greens. Definitely some browns and some gold and some rust colors will be included in this painting. So first off, we're going to be doing a wet on wet technique. And I'm going to take my picture, going to pick up some clean water, and I'm going to lay it in this lower section. I'm not for sure if you noticed, but I do have some white paper. I don't have anything in these areas. So I'm kind of creating a border of a sense by not having any paint in there. So I want to create those washes down here first. Now I'm using the Canson brand watercolor paper today. So it will dry faster than what 100% cotton will, but it'll still work nicely to be able to do some of this. I'm going to use this branch as kind of my dividing point. And then I'm going to come up here. I'm going to go around the smoke from my house, and I'm not going to put any in my house. And I'm going to be coming up here. Now I want to make sure I'm trying to leave a little bit of paper that doesn't have any water in it. And I'm just wetting these areas. Now it's okay to go over these small branches in those areas because we will be adding color. I'm not going all the way to this edge either. Now let's go ahead and pick up some color. So I'm going to be choosing this golden yellow, the ochre color. My ochres are going to be out here. And as I move in towards my house, I'm going to even get warmer with my colors doing the rust tones. So I'm basically picking up some color that's about inconsistency, maybe a little bit more pigment in there. And I'm just tapping it in here and there over that area. I'm not trying to fill up my whole space because I want some room to add some other colors. So this is my golden color. And then I'm going to be popping in a little bit of that rust tone. Okay, so you can see how I created this, a little bit of a dome effect to it. Now, while it's still wet, I'm going to pick up a little bit of rust, a little bit of brown, a little less water this time, and I'm going to be tapping that next into my house. So I'm going to go up to my house, but not on my house. And I'm going to be creating a little bit of an idea of that this is a bush structure. Because this color is wet and I'm adding wet on there, those colors should blend together and do that wet on wet technique. I can tap in a little bit up here as well. And I'm going to bring some of it next to my house on this side and tap a little bit more of it here. Okay, that looks a nice rust color. I'm going to include a little bit over here. Now we're going to do this again. We're going to add a little bit more color after this dries, and we're going to add another layer. Let's pick up a little bit more brown, and let's tap a little bit more of that in here. It's a little bit more pigment this time, a little less water. I know that this is going to be a bush right here, so I'm okay with it being more concentrated in color. Likewise over here, I established a bush in that area, so I'm okay with having more color there. Okay, beautiful. While my paper's still wet, I'm going to pick up a little bit of green. I had taken my Hooker's green and then added a little bit of brown to this color, and a reddish brown, and kind of toned that a little bit. I'm going to be popping a little bit of that green in here too. While my colors are still wet, these are just very much organic shapes. I'm not really doing bush shapes or tree shapes per se at this stage, but I am adding in some of that color. Let's add a little bit down here as well. Okay, we've got a good flow of color. I'm liking the color. Now watercolor is going to dry a little bit lighter as it dries, so this is going to look different as it dries. I'm going to come in with a little bit more clean water, and let's work a little bit down in this area as well. Again, I'm okay with going over those trees and that area. I'm going to come down here to the bottom of my house. I'm okay with some of these harsher lines at my edge. I think that looks great, and I like that look. So I'm okay with that. I don't necessarily want to lose that look. Okay, so I'm adding the water here. This is somewhat clean. It's not as clean as what it really should be. I'm going to take a little bit light version. I'm going to be maybe mixing a little bit of my rust and my gold this time, but a fairly lighter wash. And I'm going to put some of that down here at the house, at the line of where my house is sitting. And I'm going to be running some of that color towards me. It's okay if you get it on your fence. That fence is going to be darker anyway, and I'd rather see that color behind it than not see it. Okay, so we have some color there. Let's pick up a little bit of that green again. Let's add a little bit more of that color in here. And again, this is a wet on wet blend. Ooh, it's looking beautiful. I'm going to pick up a little bit more of that rust just to add a little bit tinier bit of that, but I do want to water it down. I want the contrast to be here, so I don't want all of this foreground to look exactly like my background. So I need to make sure I have some contrast, and that I'm hoping is going to be lighter than my background. Okay, I'm going to let that dry and see what happens. Let's work a little bit more on that very top part now. So I have a little bit area here. I want to do something around that top part of that smoke area. I'm going to take some of my green. It's fairly washed down, and I'm going to be adding a little bit of green. Now this is a dry paper now. It's not wet. I have a little bit more control over it of where I'm adding it. So that just helps me out in this area. Okay, that looks good. Let's add a few of those trees in. So let's add a few of those evergreen trees in. I'm going to need 2 shades of green. So I'm going to take my green that I used down here. You can see how much brighter it is in my pan here. And I'm going to take a little bit of a red brown. The red in that brown is going to neutralize my green so it's not so heavily bright green. I'm going to add a little bit more there. It's going to tone it down because they're complementary colors, the red and the green. It's a nice color to add to your greens if you want to tone them down at all. I'm going to give this a top. My brush is pretty loaded. I'm going to pick some of this up and let's start a tree. So I just need to have 2 different colors. If you notice, this one here is a different shade than this one. This one is a different shade than that one. So I'm going to be popping in one of these trees right here. It's going to be behind this tree, but I'm still going to paint it in like it's on the front. I'll change the perspective after I finish it. I'm going to come down with just a simple little line first, and then I'm going to come out to the left, to the right. I'm using the tip of my brush, come down a little ways again, left and the right, come down a little ways, left and the right, just using my tip and tapping, leaving some open areas. These are going to be very washed down tree look. They're not going to be a super strong element inside of my painting because they're in the background. Now that's one of the greens. Let's go a little bit, see if we can't get a little bit different shade by using the next color over. And we'll try that and see what we get. So this one is going to be living here. I want it to be a little shorter, so I'm going to start my top a little bit shorter. Do the same thing. So I'm changing my shape and I'm going down. I'm going to come all the way down to the little crotch of the tree there, so it looks like it's tipped in there. Oh, that looks good. That looks good without a lot of effort. Now let's go ahead and do another one. This time I'm thinking I'm going to pick up a little bit more of my green color. Add a little bit more green in there. It's still going to be neutralized because there's a tiny bit of red there. Let's give this a tap. Make sure I don't have too much color in my brush. And let's start another one. So I'm going to come here. Oh, that's still pretty wet. I better let that dry a little bit. You can kind of see how that little bloom is starting right there on the edge. And I love that look, so I don't want to get rid of it. And I don't want my green to all flow in there. So I'm going to give that a chance to dry. Now this is pretty dry, so let's go ahead and create a roof. Now you can create a roof lots of different ways. This one has a little bit of shingle detail on it. They're little scallops. You could add that on there if you'd like. This time I think I'm just going to do a simple roof. So I'm going to take a little bit of some red, brown, lighten my colors, and I'm just going to brush my color in the direction of that I drew my roof. I'm pretty much going to cover it all and try not to leave very many open spots at all if I don't have any skippers, because this is going to dry lighter, so it will dry a lot lighter. I'm going to come in here and add just a little bit of that color too. Let's add one more coat onto my top of my house here. Let's take a little bit more darker brown. And I'm gonna hold my brush sideways a little bit and get a little bit of help. If I can get my texture to come up, let's do a little bit drier. There, we got it. I had too much moisture on my brush and I wasn't able to pick up the texture from my brush. So by having a little bit drier brush, I can get a little bit more texture onto my roof by simply holding my brush off to the side and getting the texture to be created by the hairs of my brush. Okay, we'll let that dry and see what happens. Also, when you're pulling your brush, normally the darker color will happen at your base because you're pulling that color that direction. Let's add a little bit more of that darker color here because there would definitely be a shadow here and this would be darker. So let's just go ahead and add another bits of line. Okay, let's see if this is dry enough. I think that probably is dry enough. Let's go ahead and make another tree. Let's see. Okay, let's make another green tree. And I'm going to start the same way. I'm going to come down, tap my color in a little bit. Oh, it's still a little bit wet there, but I think it'll be okay. It'll still be a nice soft look. And I can stop right at that watermark line and I don't have to go any farther and just kind of treat that as like it's a bush line or something like that. Now to do that more brown tree, I changed up colors. So I ended up using a reddish brown, and just picking a color, maybe a little bit of gold in there, and mixing my own color and coming up with a tree color that looked good to me. Okay, so once I have my color on there, I can come in and tap that next tree. So I want to go down a little bit lower. Maybe I need a little bit more brown. I want there to be a difference than what is happening here. Leave a little bit of open spaces so it's not all the way filled in, and I'm just dancing that brush back and forth and every once in a while coming straight. All right, I think that looks good. Now I don't know what this little dot is, what I did. I'm going to touch it. I'm going to touch it though and soften it, see if I can't lift some of that color. I have no idea what that color was or where it came from or why there's a dot there, but we'll just soften this line out a little bit. Okay, it looks good. It looks fine. It looks fine. We always say don't stress the small stuff, right? Let's add another layer onto my house, and I'm going to be choosing a similar color to what I just did on my trees, but I definitely want to add a lot more water, very much a little more than tea consistency. I want to water it down a lot. I want to do a light color on my house, so I'm going to be washing my color of my house with this light color. Now with your house, you're going to have one dark side and one light side. So choose a side that you want as being your darker side and which one's going to be your lighter side. For mine, this one here, I did the front side here light and this side was darker. So make a decision about which one you want to make darker and which one you want to make lighter. That would be the direction of where your light would be coming from. Okay. That on. We'll let that dry. Let's add another bit of color on to this gate down here. Normally with watercolor, it's not unusual to add 2 to 3 layers of color to make your colors more rich and to darken them. So you can see how much that really did lighten. So let's add another layer. I'm going to try to do the similar pull like I did on my roof, on my door. Come down. Probably need my brush a little bit drier, but maybe I'll do that around the next time. When you're also painting the gate, if you do those little brush strokes where you are doing your lines across, then do the ones down below, again, that's going to add a little bit more interest to your post and not have them all be too even. Oh, and I forgot to do that one the first time. All right, let's add another bit of color onto our roof. So let's choose another darker color. With watercolor, you're basically choosing to paint the shadows. So these are my light highlights, and then now I'm going to be coming in with a darker color. So I'm going to be choosing to do a little bit darker. I definitely want to have a drier brush. There we go. There we're getting some texture going. That looks good. And I'm not wanting to cover up all of that first layer because those are going to be my highlights for my roof. So I want to have some of that texture showing. And see if I can come right to the edge there to make a nice crisp line. Sometimes it's hard to paint with a dry brush in watercolor. It gives your little brushes a workout. Okay, let's do that a little bit more. There, we got it. Okay, that looks good. All right, let's do a little bit more of that dark line underneath here. Strengthen that line too. Okay, that looks good. Okay, let's take a look at some of our background colors. Now everything is kind of really pastelish. Let's darken up some of these areas here. I'm going to take a little bit more of my rust color that I had used first, and I'm going to be adding a little bit of brown to that. I'm going to be darkening up that color. This is about a little bit more than ink consistency. It's probably more like a milk consistency, and I'm going to be tapping in some of that color. So I want to have this a darker area here. So I'm going to be just pushing and pulling quickly, leave some open areas so you see some of that color behind. That's my one little bush. I'm going to carry that color over here and add it to this bush. That's where we drew those little ones next to the house, bringing some of that color out. Okay, that looks great. Now let's take a little bit more of our yellow ochre color, less water this time, about milk consistency. Let's add some of that in here too. Let's do a little bit of dabbing. Now, if you feel like you got too much color on there, which I might have a little bit, I'm going to lift it a little bit, add a little bit more water so it doesn't become too opaque. Because after all, we're doing watercolor, and that looks different than acrylic paint. If you're used to painting with acrylic paint, watercolor does have its own unique properties. And the more you practice it and the more you use it, the more you're going to get comfortable with how it works. There's all kinds of things like how does it work with your paper? How does it work with how much water you're putting on? So you can see that just added another layer of color. Let's add a little bit more of this green. I definitely want to add a little bit of red brown to that to tone that down. I want it to be more of an earthy color. So let's take that color. Let's add some of that in here. Ooh, pretty. Fall is my favorite color. I always say that. Fall is my favorite color. Let's add some of it down here to anchor my house a little bit more. I'm just doing it varied. I want that color to just dance across my paper. I'm going to bring some of that color down here too, just to anchor my post a little bit. And I definitely want to take some of this color and add it into this tree area or this bush area here and add it. Again, you can see I have quite a few different open areas. I'm not covering all the space. I'm going to take a little bit of that darker red. Let's make a little path for our house here. So I'm going to take a dark one and I'm going to go shimmy, shimmy back and forth at an angle. And that's going to create like there's a little pathway there in my house if I do it back and forth. All right, let's work a little bit on side of my windows here. I'm going to take the yellow ochre, add plenty of water. I'm going to give that inside a little bit of glow. So I'm going to be coming in. Now you can leave a little bit of white showing at this time as well. That'll even give your windows just even a little bit more, like there's a light on in there and it's glowing. Okay, super cute. I'm going to stop right there. Now I have to give this house a little bit more chance to dry. I am going to maybe take up a little bit of this red brownish color I got laying over here. Let's do a little bit of work here on the inside of my house and darken it up. So this time, let's see, I'm still going to leave this being my lightest side. So if this is going to be my lightest side, you can see I have a little bit of work to do on this side. So let's add another layer onto my house here. So this is going to be my dark. Underneath my roof line here, that would be my darkest color. My darkest shadows are going to be underneath here. Now I'm painting with a number 6 paintbrush. I haven't gone down in my size at all. And that's okay. And like I said, this is going to have some pen work on it. So it's going to be a little bit messy and not exact in the end. I just picked up a little bit more color and added it in there. Let's add a little bit more. That I don't want it to be too dull. I'm going to have to make sure my door is slightly different. Okay, now my sides are kind of looking the same, so that means I need to darken up this side a little bit. So I'm going to be adding just a little bit more darker color. I added a little bit more red into my house and adding that onto there. Okay, let's let that dry, and then we'll add some details to our windows. All right, let's take a look at this door here, or this gate. It needs to have a little bit more oomph. Let's come down and do a little bit more texture on here. Darken that color up. It's going to be in the foreground. It's the closest one to us, so that means we're going to see a little bit more color, and then it would be farther away. So this is okay to add a little bit more detail into this door because it's sitting right there in the very front part of your painting. So take a little time and add some more color. If you like doing pen work, this might be a great area to do some pen work on too. Okay, let's work a little bit on this background chimney. I'm going to add some red in here. I have this bright red, but I'm going to add a little bit of brown to it and dirty it down. And I'm going to use that for the chimney. It's this fun red color. It might take a little bit of extra work to get it to be, okay, there's that red, little pop of red. I'm going to come down and add that a little bit on my gate too. I like adding some of that color all over my picture. So if I put it up there, I need to add it some other place else. And I'm going to choose to do it on my gate. And let's see, maybe I will add these little window boxes with some red on it. That would be fun. Do that. And maybe this time this door gets a little bit of a red barn look to it. Fun, fun, fun. Now I can always tone that red down. That got a little bright at the top. I will say that. I can tone it down with a little bit more brown, pick up a little bit of brown and tap that over it. Remember, I can always go darker, but I can't go lighter. There we go. Well, I can't easily anyway. I'd have to add some gouache or something like that. So I can add that red, that brownish red into these different areas and really add some interest that way. So that brings that color down and forefront on my painting. It's coming together. It's coming together. All right, let's add a little bit more detail. Let's come around. So basically I'm working out of the browns down here, my greens, that's where I'm working. I haven't dipped into any of the oranges, mostly just the golds and the rust. Let's add a little bit to that top here. Now I need to darken this up a little bit more even because this is my dark side of my house. So I definitely want to add some more color over here. All right, I'm kind of losing that top detail, but I can probably bring that in with my pen work if I decided I wanted it. Let's add a little bit more, soften those colors from the red. That's pretty, I like that. Now you can add even more color here. You can tell my colors are even more rich on this one. And I simply picked up that red color and I added some brown to it. This is one of my favorite fall colors. This is burgundy brown, red brown. It's one of my favorites. And I'm going to tap a little bit of that in here too. So that picks up the red from the chimney, the door, and some of those other areas. So I'm just going to be tapping in a little bit of that color here and there. Like so. I can even put in a little bit up here if I wanted to. And it's spreading it around my picture a little bit. Let's even add a little bit over here and this part. Pretty. Oh, I love that color. It's one of my favorites. Okay. All right. Let's stop right there. Let's go ahead and add, let this give a chance to dry. I need to add a little bit, maybe a little bit more bright to my windows. Let's add a little bit more bright to my windows. Yellow, 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 yellow. I want it to look like it's glowing in there, like somebody's home. Pretty. All right, I'm going to switch down to a smaller brush now. I don't have a number on this. It's probably a 0 is what I'm thinking. And this is what I'm going to be using to create those little whimsical trees in the back. I'm going to be taking paint just directly out of my paint pan with just a little bit of water in there. I can come over to here and pull it, like twist and pull towards me and get a nice little pull on it. If you need to add a little bit more water to get it to travel through your brush, you can do that. But I'm looking for a more ink type of quality. Now this is when I'm going to turn my picture too, because I can pull easier towards me than I can up. So I'm going to come on this area here. The area is pretty dry, and I'm going to be following those little pencil lines. I'm using light pressure on my brush and then just pulling it. Now remember, these aren't going to have to be exact. We're just doing those little soft lines. If you want to practice your pulling of your trees before you actually go to your paper, take a piece of your scrap paper and try a few of them off to the side. But this really is all about practicing anyway. So this is just a fun art break. Don't stress about it. The more you do it, the better you're going to get. And you'll find that it becomes easier as you get along with doing what you're doing. Okay, so this color is called burned brown. Burnt umber is basically what it is. Okay, and there's my little trees right there. I'm going to take that same color. This time I might add a little bit of the next one down just to change it up just a little bit. I'm going to have a little more water. Oops, that was next to my gouache. I don't want any gouache in there. Now let's go ahead and do this tree here. So if you need to turn it if it helps to be able to pull your hand. And I'm going to follow this around. So this really does help. If you don't have a small little brush like this, they are super helpful for doing these little lines, for doing trees and stuff. You could also do all of this in a pen if you would like to do this in a pen. You could create these in a pen. Okay, so that's that little one there. I have a little bit of a scrubby brush here, and I'm going to just tap, 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 make a little bit of like a line work and then a little bit of tapping motion just to give it a little bit more airiness so it's not so hard there. You can come in and make a little line underneath it to go ahead and anchor it. Let's go ahead and now I'm going to change up my color again. So I'm going to do this a little bit more red. It's a little bit more burnt sienna. And let's do this little shrub here. So this one's going to be behind my gate. So I want to skip over my gate area there. And then I'm going to be putting those similar lines like I did here right on there. So this is more of like a shrub. And these can be very casual. They don't have to, you don't have to feel like they have to be perfect. There. I can even maybe come in after this dries and add some more green to that area and darken that up to give it more of a definition. Now let's go ahead and do that next brush over this little tiny tree. Let's do that in the same color that I did this one in to give it some difference. And I need to turn it again because I need to pull my hand. It's just so much easier for me to pull those nice lines towards me than it is to pull them up. Okay, so there's that one. Let's do this one next to here. I'm going to change back to that little darker brown color. And let's do those little shrubs back there. Make sure you always have a paper towel in your hand so you can give your brush a tab. Let's go ahead and do these little lines here. I can barely see my pencil lines, but that's okay. I don't have to do them exact either. Okay, let's do these ones here. Off to the side, and they're all coming back towards this area. So they're like a little brush that's growing next to my house. Okay, let's turn it. I can do them easier if I turn it. And let's do these pulling towards me. And you might want to do a little bit of that skipping motion and then coming up and doing some dots just to give a little bit more airiness to your painting. All right, let's work on this big tree here. Well, this is our biggest tree. So you can mix your own color or keep it. And then I'm going to come into this one and make it a little darker, a nice rich color. I should have maybe switched up to my 6 brush because this is a bigger tree. But we will just work with what I got in my hand. Okay, and then I'm going to turn it again. and then pull it towards me. So even though that green is behind there, it doesn't bother me. Just be able to see it. Some of your paint will cover it up and you won't see that tree behind you. You can always scrub it just a tiny bit and that will soften that color too if the line is too harsh for you. Okay. Okay, that looks good. I'm thinking that looks good. Hopefully you're able to see that. Hopefully I was in camera. I just looked up again. I might not have had it in camera. Okay, let's work a little bit on this smoke. I chose to do it in gray last time. This time maybe I will do it in a Payne's gray. Maybe a dark blue might look pretty. So this is the Payne's gray, and it has a little bit of gray, a little bit of blue in there. Find my color again. There we go. It's watered down a fair amount. Okay, and then let's do the smoke here. You could leave a little bit of white showing. And it's okay to see that background because it's just smoke. So that's all I'm going to be doing with that. I'm leaving it that way. Okay, very pretty. Let's do a little bit of pen work. I'm going to be using my 01 micron pen to do the dark work. And then I'm going to be using the Uniball Signo pen to be able to do a little bit of white if I want to do that white in there. Now those who have watched me several times, you know I love to do this free sketching line, which means I'm not going to follow my lines exact, and I'm going to do multiple lines. I just like that looseness of it, and I'm not going to do everything on this picture either. So you can see how it's going to kind of make that house come to life by adding the line work on there. You can create this if you're a gel pen user. You could do that with your gel pens. Colored pencils, you could do that with your colored pencils too. You can also do this exact, just because I like doing this way doesn't mean you have to. It might not be your thing. So do what makes you happy, and if you just like it as a watercolor, leave it as a watercolor. Okay, let's do a little bit here. Okay. Now these pens are permanent, so like if you decide after you get this part done and you still want to add watercolor to it, you can. Just make sure that your ink is dry before you touch it with your watercolor, and then it will be fine. That's one of the reasons. So you can see I'm just kind of going to town here and scribbling, but I do enjoy scribbling, and I will carry my lines even past where I have watercolor. If it makes sense and I want my lines there, I'll do it. So that's what I was doing there. So I'm taking my painting and adding a real loose quality to it. I love to scribble, so this is kind of like up my alley. Okay, I'm going to do some more line work here on the skate because it is the closest to me. And I would see most of my detail here. By doing this, this kind of reminds me of pencil sketching. You can add a few grasses with this. Add some little scribbly bits that way. It's a fun way to get real loose with your drawing and add some scribbly bits. Sometimes I get a little carried away, but it all still works. Okay, so my path here, I'm going to turn my picture sideways and follow my little line here to give it a little bit more dimension. Let's do a little tiny bit of work on the roof, not a lot. I'm just basically putting these lines in the direction that my roof I had drawn it. Okay, let's go a little bit across. Let's do some cross hatching here. So I'm not trying to do exact shingles. I'm just creating a feeling of like this might be a thatched roof, or it could be a shingled roof, but I'm not trying to create it exact. there. I think I like that. I think I'm going to strengthen the hearts on this one too, since I put them in there. Okay, now you can decide, do you want a little bit of splitter splatter? Maybe a little splitter splatter would look great. Let's take a little bit of my darker colors that I have over here and water them down somewhat. And then I can come in and add, oops, a little bit of splitter splatter. A little bit tiny. Sometimes if my dots get too hard, I can come in with a little bit of water and go over the top of those two, just plain water, and add on top of it. I mostly kept them to the top of my sky area. That looks good. Oh, and I didn't do any white, but I'll show you the white on this one since my paper's wet now. So I did add a few little white ones over here. So if you want to add a little bit of Posca pen on there, go ahead and add it right there. And I added some on my smoke too, to brighten it up just a little bit. But my paper's kind of wet now, so I don't want to actually touch anything. Well, I'm hoping that you felt like this might be a painting you could do and that you were encouraged to try. So I hope you do give it a try. And again, if you would like to have the tracers for the painting, there'll be a clickable link inside of the description box that you can go ahead and click, and that'll lead you right to my Ko-fi page. And if you'd like to share your work, I do have a Facebook page under Painting Crafty. There's a link in the description box for that too, and you'll see a page there that are an advertisement for this a particular drawing. Put it underneath there, and I'd love to share your work because you encourage others to try, and it most certainly doesn't have to look like mine to be good. And I love sharing others people's work on my page, so please do share your work. I love to share it. It makes me, it's like having little gifts from you when you share your work. It encourages me too. Makes me super happy to see that you're enjoying the art projects that we're doing on Painting Crafty. Well, that is it for today for my friends, and hopefully you'll come back again and join me and leave me a comment and let me know if you think you might do this, and let me know you stopped by to say hello. Thank you for joining me, and hopefully you'll come back and join me again.